If you've been waiting for that signature win against one of the top three teams in the NBA, well, this weekend will leave you still waiting. The Knicks got absolutely destroyed once again by Boston in Boston to close out a terrible weekend against the East top teams. What does this mean for Thibs? Where did the Knicks go from here? Are there some silver linings? We're getting into it right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. He's Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and the Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast. And today we will be recapping a 118-105 loss by the Knicks to the Celtics. But first, I had to remind you all that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And I want to thank you all for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day. Whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And if the podcast is not enough for you all by itself, then make sure to check out the Locked On Knicks newsletter, because your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Knicks daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. On today's show, we're going to be talking about the Knicks loss to the Celtics, 118-105. Walk you through what went wrong in this one and ask some more existential questions about Thibs' future with this team, because it's starting to get to a point where if the Knicks can't summit the mountain, they might need a new tour guide. I guess we'll see if that's the case. And then we're going to look for some silver linings and see what we could take away in the good from this game, a game that saw the Knicks return to relative full health and yet not quite look like they can hang with one of the best teams in the East yet again. Gavin, I think that's a good place to start. I mean, 118-105, we were talking before the show, doesn't really encapsulate this game. I felt like it was more of a blowout than 13 points would suggest. I mean, the Knicks were down by 20 plus points I believe in the first half, definitely early in the second half, and then had a crazy comeback to end the third quarter, get things to within 4 points, and then just kind of did the thing that they've done against these really good teams a couple times, where they just run out of gas on this comeback attempt, and the Celtics just kind of stepped on the gas themselves, finished this thing off. You know, they did a lot of the damage with Tatum on the bench. Of course, Tatum is not going to stay on the bench. He comes back in. The Celtics just take back off, run away with it, and end this thing in swift fashion in the fourth quarter. Not a pretty game. Not a pretty series so far with this Boston team this year, dating all the way back to the first game of the season. And once again, the Knicks still find themselves looking for that first win against one of the top three teams in the league. And it's starting to feel increasingly unlikely that they're going to get one of those before the end of the regular season.
Yeah, 0-7 now. And look, like going back to preseason, just to put things in perspective, I was saying, and I feel like a lot of people were saying, that Boston was clearly the best team in the league. I've described them before and presently as just a perfectly built basketball team, right? No weak point on defense. 5 guys who can switch anything, who can handle every matchup. Drew Holiday, Karl-Anthony Town gets him in the post and he strips the basketball, right? Same thing he used to do to Julius Randle. Offensively, 5 guys who can pass, shoot, and dribble. 2 superstar wings, right? Like Boston, like they won this game today. They won the earlier games this season, but this war was won years ago when Mikhail Prokhorov decided that draft picks don't matter, and his team of geriatrics was sustainable enough to essentially give Boston their draft for whatever it was, 4 or 5 years, and Boston gets Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown handed to them for 2 guys who were way past their prime. They get Drew Holiday because Damian Lillard, the Bucks decided Damian Lillard gave them a higher ceiling. They get Derek White because the Spurs decided that Josh Richardson was roughly as good and only worth an extra first-round pick. And I did not say it at the time, but I said it about a month into last season. Like, the Knicks might have lost this battle long-term when they didn't go out and get Kristaps Porzingis for the meager price I'm guesstimating here, but given what Washington traded him for, maybe it would have taken, I don't know, Mitchell Robinson and a first-round pick, and you could imagine how this team would look. Like, obviously, it would have taken different ensuing moves, but with a Karl-Anthony Towns, Kristaps Porzingis front line, like, he is so clearly, to me, the accelerant of this Boston team, where you could have answers for everything else. And like the Knicks, like, were working their switch pretty well, and Karl-Anthony Towns is doing a good job doing that. And then they just have this 7-3 guy that can bang 27 footers, can post you up, and is one of the best rim protectors in basketball for the best rim protecting team in basketball. So they are a perfectly built basketball team. I said at the beginning of the season, would be an embarrassment if they don't have an injury and you win. All that being said, the gap is not 3 games where you're down 35, 35, and 24 points. The gap is just not that big. And the reason I was confident in what the Knicks built this summer is because you put yourself in a situation where if you play Boston and they go cold and you get hot for 7 games, maybe you pull off the upset. Jason Tatum pulls a hamstring. He misses the last 4 games of the series. You're capable of pulling off an upset. You're capable of winning an NBA title. It's why you still compete when the Warriors get Kevin Durant. It's why you still compete when Boston builds a team like they currently built. And Alex, we can get into the reasons why. There were major effort issues in this game. The Knicks have a clear-cut problem, which I've described in depth, and I'll go into again today, getting their best lineups on the floor and not having enough shooting on the floor. They're simply not getting enough for OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, who were the 2 players I talked about preseason as the guys that I had confidence in these types of games, because the entire NBA wanted OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges because nominally there was no weakness in their game and there was no playing them off the floor. And that does not feel true right now, particularly for Mikal. But I don't know where you want to start amongst those assorted issues. To me, the biggest one right now is the head coach.
Yeah, I mean, we can start, I guess, with Mikal, a very impressive garbage time performance, 5 of 7 in the fourth quarter, 2 of 4 from 3 for 12 points, making up, of course, 12 out of his 14 for the entire game. So 3 quarters of basically not existing. And then, when it didn't matter at all, when the Knicks were basically already dead in the water, he came to life late in this game. I mean, I think that's, you can say what you want about OG, like, the guy is in his second game back from an injury that is probably causing him discomfort, whatever, like, no excuses. If you're on the floor, you got to play. But, he's also not the guy that was brought in to be like the third option on this team, and not the guy that we expected to have the skill set to make that happen. Instead, Josh Hart is just sort of like taking that role by force as like the third offensive option, just because that's what's needed of him most of the time. But Bridges, I mean, these last 2 games have kind of just been like the encapsulation of what's been the problem with him this season. And his performance in this game really stood out to me because it seemed obvious that the Knicks as a whole, maybe this was an emphasis in shoot around or practice or something, but I mean, the first few possessions of the game, he was bringing the ball down the floor. Like, it seemed intentional. It seemed like they were trying to say, hey, we're going to at least like pretend like Mikal Bridges is going to be, one of the offensive forces of this game. Like, defend him, please defend him. And, he just didn't do anything with it, and it would be like he would bring the ball down and it was just like a token gesture to get it into someone else's hands. And, then there was the issues of Karl-Anthony Towns getting double teamed. And, it makes you wonder about the preparation level for this team when the thing that all the teams that have been successful against you did happens again, and you get beat by it again, with Karl-Anthony Towns being basically taken out of the first half of this game by just being aggressively doubled, and the Knicks not really being prepared for that. Like, whether that's Towns or whether that's the whole team, like, it certainly didn't seem like they had great ideas for how to bail him out of those situations. They kind of all were scrambling anytime that Cat would, get doubled there. But, a lot of that comes down to Mikal too. Like, the guy's just hanging out on the perimeter. He's not really making aggressive cuts, which he's kind of supposed to do. Like, that's part of his game, like part of what could make him really great. Like, he's not being aggressive, looking for his own shots. He's, him bringing the ball down the floor early on this game to me felt like a joke, if I'm being completely honest. Like, it was like performative. It was like, hey, look, we're going to try to get this guy involved. It's like, no, you're not. Like, don't mess around. Like, Boston knows that you're not going to actually do that. Like, they've scouted you. Like, they know what you do as a team, and he's not going to magically start, looking to score the ball or run pick and rolls or be like mega aggressive. And that was really what the Knicks needed out of him. And, I really hope that whatever. If things like quote unquote don't work out with this team, and they never win a championship, we're probably still looking at a team that's like a better version of like the Atlanta Hawks, like in the early to mid 2000s or 2010s. I mean, I guess the late 2000s, early 2010s, where they were just
2015 was the year where they had 4 All-Stars, if I'm remembering correctly. Teague, Millsap, Korver, Horford. But
and even prior to that, like with Joe Johnson and Horford, like they were a good team for a long time, but never a great team. And I think that's where this team risks landing right now, which would be a shame because we dared to dream a little higher, but it feels like after these last 2 games and based off everything that we've seen this season, that aiming much higher than just a fun team that makes some appearances in the second round, maybe a fluky Eastern Conference Finals appearance or something like that, doesn't really feel realistic at this particular juncture. And obviously they still have some means to get better. They have, I think that a lot of their thought behind the Cat trade was having an enormous trade piece should they ever need it to go try to get someone like a Giannis or something like that. But it does seem like unless Mitchell Robinson gives the most crazy shot in the arm that we've ever seen to this team, that they're just not quite ready to be on the level of these top teams yet, unfortunately.
No, and I think the premise of this team when it was built was I described it, I think after the Cat trade, lower floor, higher ceiling. And I remember people pushed back on me and said higher floor, higher ceiling. And I think we're seeing why I thought the floor might be a little lower at this point, because I think the premise was that we are going to have between, like with Cat at the 5, offense is never going to be an issue. Doesn't matter if it's the Thunder, if it's the Celtics, if it's the Cavs, we're going to score the ball at will. And then you need like two guys who we were like, remember, I think maybe it was your bold prediction, my bold prediction preseason, that OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges were both going to make all defense. Like we're going to need those 2 guys to play out of their minds. We're going to need Josh Hart to step up and those guys to just sort of hold the fort down. And neither of those things has happened. Like, and that's why the floor of this team is lower than I think a lot of people anticipated, at least against great competition, while acknowledging they're still 37-19, still have, I think are tied for the 5th best record in basketball. So it hasn't been all bad, but the most concerning part is that like that ceiling version of this team where you're like, they're just going to be unstoppable offensively. We've said it before, but it's true against 27 teams. And it is just not true against 3 teams. And what that essentially comes down to for me is you are putting Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns into a position offensively where they have to create against a great defender, but not just a great defender, like 2 or 3 other guys that are slotted and ready to rotate over and ready to stunt, ready to help, ready to throw an extra hand up. And I was trying to figure out throughout this game, is that just an indictment of Jalen Brunson that he's a top 10 player, but not a top 5 player? Because Luka Doncic, like he's drawing doubles no matter what. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's drawing doubles no matter what. Giannis, Jokic, right? And then I watched, and that was sort of my thinking in the first half, and that was sort of going to be the take I came out with. And then I watched that third quarter where Deuce McBride is out there, and I get smacked in the face, and I say, oh yeah, if you surround this guy with actual shooting and someone who's, to your point, actually willing to move off the ball, like I don't think it's a coincidence that opened things up in conjunction with using Josh Hart in the action, since Hart is the main person that they're not guarding when you use him on the ball. When you use him as a screener, all of a sudden their center has to get involved, and you see Jalen Brunson blow by Luke Cornett for a runner. You see him hit a 3 in Luke Cornett's face. You see Josh Hart flip a screen late, and Jaylen Brown is looking the other way, and Brunson puts on a nasty crossover and hits a wing 3, but that is all opened up by involving Josh Hart in the action and having Deuce McBride out there to space the floor and that stuff. We've been saying a lot of even more than us. That is the religion of our good friends over at the Hot Hand Theory podcast. They've been preaching it all season long, and they're absolutely right. And like we can get into the Tom Thibodeau discussion next. That's why I have such a big issue is like if us like quote unquote blog boys are seeing that and it clearly works, Tom Thibodeau has to see it. And to me, it is so obvious that even when things work, he is blind to his own success, does not realize why he was successful, and then does not go back to it. And in turn, like it doesn't sustain. And none of that is me saying like, oh, if the Knicks play Deuce McBride, they beat the Celtics to be better than the Celtics. No, like Boston's better. But again, they're not like 80 points through 3 games better. But we can talk about it more, Alex, in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about our good friends over at DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready to swoop. They swoosh, you save thanks to Dash Pass. Every time a player drops 50 or more in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more during the 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. Here are a few ways you can take advantage of this deal. A game day feast after an epic 50-point performance. Celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, or burgers from your favorite spot delivered straight to your door. Late night cravings, whether you're staying up watching highlights or just need a midnight snack. Use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving big. Or fueling your watch party, planning to catch the next game. Order your go-to snacks and meals at a discount and get ready for your high-scoring action. So sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. All right, it is time to do, Alex, what has not been our pastime in the last couple of years. Go back to 21-22 was one of our favorite pastimes, and that is talking about Tom Thibodeau's job security. I spent a lot of time going in on it in the Cavs postgame podcast, which if you missed that, go check that out. That went up Saturday in case you missed it. Alex, you haven't had the opportunity yet, so let me cede the floor. What do you think about Tom Thibodeau and the job he's been doing?
Well, it's funny. I real quick just wanted to throw one last thing into the bucket from the last segment.
Yeah.
I will just say with regards to this overall team and what its floor versus its ceiling could be, I think it is important to remember, even though we're like hurting after these last two losses and considering what this team's ceiling could be, it is still important to know, like, I mean, they do have the best record that the Knicks have had in 30 years. I would say that their floor from last year has still risen. I think that they still are probably, I mean, I don't want to say a shoe-in second round team, but like almost about as close as you can get. Like, I think that they've shown that they can handle everybody below them in the standings pretty handily. It's mostly just the two teams above them that have proven to be the biggest unsolvable problem for them so far this year. And Thibs is part of that reason. And I mean, I think what it comes down to is they're still getting they're getting beaten by the same things over and over by these really good teams, and that's the most frustrating part. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I watched on and off the first half of the Cavs game the other day, and then just turned it off because I was just kind of disgusted and didn't feel like watching anymore. But getting beat by a lot of the same things by that team, of just leaving Mitchell too open, not sticking with him on the perimeter, allowing him to get cooking. And then, what happens when he gets hot is he just gets hotter and hotter and hotter and does not cool down until, it's probably already too late. And, sort of a similar thing in this game. Like, Boston was not really, they weren't playing their cards close to the chest in this one. They came in and almost immediately started going to the thing that was killing the Knicks in the last game, which was having Jason Tatum bring the ball down the floor, having him run the pick and roll, forcing the Knicks to get over screens or, be creative with how they would, show out to him. And they just weren't doing it early on. And it was, I mean, they were lucky to not be in a bigger hole early because Tatum, could have scored a lot more points. The guy, as it stands, ended up with nearly a 25-point triple-double. But like, they were utilizing his passing. And I mean, obviously he's an MVP caliber player. There's only so much you can do, but you gotta bring a little something different. Like, there just was nothing changed going into this game. And I think that's sort of, if we want to start the discussion on Thibs, I think that's my biggest issue, is that he is slow to adjust with a lot of different things. And, I think that a lot of coaches would have come into this game with the thought process of, let's try something different against Boston because nothing that we've done has worked previously. And yet I feel like Thibs's mentality is typically, and this goes for against pretty much any team, and this comes with varying results, but his mentality is almost always less like, let's try something new, and more, well, we just didn't execute well enough last time, so we just have to be more perfect at what we do this time. And I just don't think that works when you're trying to figure out how to beat these best teams. You have to be willing to try new things on the fly. And again, if the idea of that this time was we're going to have Mikal Bridges bring the ball down the floor, like, you're going to have to try a little harder than that. Like, that's not going to be the difference that's going to win you a game against these guys, let alone a series against these guys. And as it stands right now, I think, barring the Knicks fully collapsing in the first round or something, I think they're pretty soundly staring down a date with Boston in the second round right now. And I would not be surprised if it was a sweep at this point. Like, I really think that somehow they are worse. They play this team in particular, worse this year than they even did last year. And I can't quite nail down why. Maybe it's just as simple as Isaiah Hartenstein and the presence that he brought, but maybe you could solve some of that by getting Mitchell Robinson back and having a little more effective of an interior deterrent and a guy who can show out to the perimeter a little better in that, like, 1-5 or 3-5 or whatever pick and roll that they happen to be running, which would maybe help you against like Porzingis a little more, who you mentioned, rightly was like one of the X factors today. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. The fact is that the Knicks have one of the highest paid coaches in the league whose job it is to figure these things out. And as you also mentioned, these guys have dropped their games to the Celtics by like a combined like 80 points in 3 games and not doing much better against the Cavs and definitely not doing any better against the Thunder. So like the 3 best teams in the league that you figure are the 3 favorites to win the title this year are all just leagues ahead of the Knicks. And it does make you wonder if at some point they're going to have to make the tough decision and say, hey, Thibs, thanks so much for getting us here, but like, you're not the guy to get us over the top, because we're going to need someone that can think a little more outside of the box if we're going to make that happen.
Yeah, so I'll put myself in a position I did not expect to be in tonight and defend Tom Thibodeau a little bit. I thought he made 2 key adjustments that worked really well. It's just that Boston has counters for everything. He did start switching Karl-Anthony Towns a little bit more a game after we watched Jason Tatum just absolutely torch him. Like when he was in drop, when he's trying to get to the level, he would never get there in time. And this is why I've advocated for it. Like when you switch Cat, like unlike when he's trying to come up from a drop to catch up to Tatum or in a back pedal as Tatum's pulling up from a jumper, it's like going up against a superior. It's almost like you're sumo wrestling. The other guy's way better than you, and like he's coming from downhill and you're coming from uphill, right? There's just no chance. Well, Thibs at least leveled the playing field by letting him switch, and 2 possessions in the first half, switches onto Jason Tatum, shuts him down, missed jumper, switches onto Jaylen Brown, shuts him down, missed jumper. To me, like if Cat is at center, and it's a lot to ask him to do, and it's not always going to work because these guys are really good and Cat is somewhat limited, but his greatest strength as a defender is that he has really good hands, and laterally, he does have pretty good feet as long as he's like given a real chance, which he is in a switch. So I'm hoping we get more of that. I was happy we got that. And then offensively, I won't belabor it, but it was the one I already mentioned, like getting Josh Hart into the action was important. The fundamental issue to me is that he doesn't make the most important adjustment, which is playing Deuce McBride a lot more. Again, I won't bore people with it, but he's a guy who's featured in the Knicks' 5 most important lineups. He was on the floor and in a game where he really didn't do much in terms of active impact offensively, right? He finished this game 1 for 7, 0 for 4 from 3, 2 points. He had one absolutely sick assist where he drove the length of the court, like baited 2 Celtics with him, and then threw like a cross-court hook pass on a dime to Landry Shamet, who made it 3. That was the play of the game. I was really proud of the bench. Shamet, of course, never played again after hitting 2 threes in the first half, finally got hot, never sees the floor, plays 6 minutes or 5 minutes, scores 6 points. The bench had a really nice run to get the Knicks back into it. And then that Deuce-led lineup in the third quarter had that stretch where it was 35-12 in favor of the Knicks. And for once this year, for one sole stretch, they kicked the Celtics' butt. And how does Tom Thibodeau respond to that? Well, comes out fourth quarter. Karl-Anthony Towns makes 2 deep threes. Derek White answers with 2 threes of his own. Knicks are still hanging around. They're down by like 8 or 9 points. Towns hurts his knee. And instead of immediately pivoting and saying, all right, I better get OG Anunoby out there to play the 4, so we have a little bit of rim protection next to Precious Achiuwa, and we have some physicality and some rebounding and some size, he bails on that. And he says, all right, we're going Precious Achiuwa and Josh Hart, which inspired an all-time iconic tweet from our guy XJ, who tweeted, bro went small and bad spacing. That's unheard of, LOL. And it's funny, but you're laughing and crying at the same time because it is just Thibs not getting the message that Precious Achiuwa against the Boston Celtics, and I know some of it is just limited options, right? Because Ariel Hukporti isn't really an option either, but like Precious should not play a second against this team. It is a mismatch that Boston punishes every single time. He looks out of place. He's simply not good enough to be on the floor, doesn't do enough things well to play against the Boston Celtics. And you do that, you limit your spacing. Boston went on a run that ultimately ended this basketball game, but I don't know. We can move on from Thibs if you want, unless you have any final points. I wanted to say real quick on Mikal Bridges. Like I spent this weekend both people agreeing with me and catching a lot of flack for saying like I've gotten to the point where I don't see him as a third offensive option on a championship team, and that's why you give him 5 first-round picks, right? You overpay for the notion that this guy was the final missing piece. And like the Cavs have 4 better offensive players. The Celtics have 4 better offensive players than him. The Thunder have 3. The Grizzlies have 3. The Nuggets have 3. The Lakers have 3. The Clippers have 3. The Wolves arguably have 3. The Mavs might have 2 or 3. The Warriors have at least 2. Like he's just not good enough in these games. And I think what exacerbates it from me is that I don't see any fight from him, Alex. I don't see any pushback. Like he clanks 2 jumpers and he's just lifeless the rest of the game. And I contrast it with last year where like Dante DiVincenzo, like he would still be like chucking deep threes and like coming and just like playing with some like spittle coming out of him. I don't know the right way to phrase it, but some fire in his belly. And I don't see that from Mikal. And that's where this team just feels so different to me. It feels like all that fight has just been knocked out of it.
Yeah, I feel pretty similar, and I'll give a little take on what I think of just this team's ability to come out strong, and again, maybe it's something that comes back to the coaching as well. Certainly, they have not seemed super prepared in a lot of these games, or at least not fired up. So I'll talk about that in just a moment when we get back in, and then maybe we'll try to find some positives in this game. I think the bench maybe deserves a little bit of a shout out in this one for keeping them somewhat alive in the first half. So we'll get into that in just a moment when we get back in. But first, I had to let y'all know about our friends over at FanDuel. And when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. So I love using FanDuel's live betting feature. It's one of my favorites. It keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Gavin, we're back in to continue talking through this game. Hopefully not for too much longer. Someone put me out of my misery with this one. But I will just say, what you said about the, Mikal not coming out with enough fire or whatever, fire and desire, as Clyde might say.
Yeah, sure.
I kind of feel the same about the whole team, if I'm being completely honest. Like I was saying it to you before we started recording, but a common theme that I've noticed with this team in a lot, other than maybe that magical first half against OKC that we reference all the time, the one game where they came out and it was like, hell yeah, they can hang with these. Not only can they hang with this team, but they can beat the crap out of them. Like, let's go. The one time where against against the Cavs, the first time early in the season.
It was 110-104. It was a close game.
It was close. I was at that game. Like, I remember just being like, we'll get them next time. Like, this was just a rough shooting game or whatever. But at least they were like right there with them. But in recent times, it just feels like, and I mean, sometimes they do this against lesser teams too, but it seems like this team comes out with the mentality of like that they don't have to come out with their full fire to start a game. And it's bitten them every single time against these really good teams. Like this game, they get in like a 21-point hole or something after the first quarter. I mean, it was not pretty. Like it was damn near 20 points, like 38-18 or 19 or something like that. And, it's just like, you even just hear the interview with Josh Hart, in between quarters, the reporter for ESPN, whose name I'm forgetting, unfortunately. But she is interviewing Josh Hart and is like, so what went wrong? He's like, well, we wanted to run with them. We didn't run. We're playing slow. we're doing this, we're doing that. It's like we've seen them come out with a game plan of we're going to run against teams before. Like, it's not unusual. Why did they not just do that in this game then? Like, if that's what their stated goal was, they could have fooled me that their game plan was to start running in this game. It's just everyone on this team sometimes seems to come out just lethargic, and there was kind of no excuse for it in this one against a team that they I think desperately wanted to beat. I mean, they should desperately want to beat them. They're sort of the standard bearers, of the whole conference and the whole league now. Like,
and they've embarrassed you twice, and you got embarrassed 2 days before. Like I just cannot imagine last year's team having this kind of performance after that. I don't know.
Exactly. It's just it does feel like they just don't have that certain edge to them anymore sometimes. And then they find it too late. And in this game, it's like they found it in the third quarter. They go on that great run, get it within 4 points, but then they just understandably ran out of gas. I mean, you're facing a really good, really deep team. Like, yeah, you expend all that energy getting, all the way back, and then you're not able to get it across the finish line because Cat tweaks his knee, and you just don't have another answer for these guys. Jason Tatum checks back in the game, and suddenly, like, you're toast, because of course you are. It's just I wish that they would come out a little stronger sometimes. I guess that would be my segue to, like, the bench. Like, I give them a lot of props in this game. Like, Landry Shamet came out, gave like a ton of energy in the first half, and again, to your point, the end of last segment, like, doesn't get rewarded for that at all with any more minutes. 5.5 minutes and done, and that's it. Even though he had a really great first half, like, Campaign comes out, does a really good job of giving them a shot in the arm. Deuce McBride, like, on defense at least, was doing great, even if the offense wasn't quite there in this game. Like, all those guys, did what they could to, like, get this team back in it, and they didn't really get rewarded in the second half with, like, more minutes. And then we saw, I think, even though they proved that they could go in there and not only, like, hang with the Celtics in the first half, but actually, like, they kind of brought the Knicks back in the first half, or at least kept them afloat enough to make a comeback. Then Thibs just kind of said, well, I don't trust you guys enough to do that again in the second half. And then the starters burned out, and then everything fell apart. Like, I don't know. It just kind of seems like a consistent theme. And again, that's, sort of plays into the Thibs thing of, like, does this guy get it? Like, is he going to be able to manage a good enough rotation to get this team over the hump? And his biggest weakness is the rotations, and it always has been. It always will be. He likes things to follow a certain script, and he's very rigid about it. And I think that his lack of flexibility there might ultimately be the thing that someday, maybe not this summer, maybe it's like a year from this summer, something like that, if the Knicks continue to kind of, like, peter out in the second round or whatever. But at a certain point, it's probably going to cost him his job, whether it's this summer, whether it's next summer, whether it's 3 years from now, whether it's when it's too late and Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns' primes are over, and this window is expired. At some point, you feel like that it's going to come back to bite Thibs, that he doesn't just quite have a good enough finger on the pulse of this team.
Yeah, I would say it is a dereliction of duty if Leon Rose does not get rid of him this summer. And look, we've talked about our doubts in the past, and you have to. And I said it last podcast, I'll say it again. Like, he is like the floor raiser in the NBA. He goes to your franchise, and you become a professional franchise. And this was a Knicks team that, with the exception of one magical year, had not been a professional franchise in over 2 decades. And he, like, not single-handedly, obviously the players Leon Rose brought in, like the entire, the training staff, the scouts, like the draft team, like everyone has played a role in this. Thibs is, like, arguably behind maybe just Jalen Brunson and Leon, is like the MVP and the face of this turnaround. He deserves an incredible amount of credit for that. But I think, like, when you talk about floor raiser and then you talk about ceiling raiser, like, it is so incredibly obvious that his understanding of modern NBA offense, like, and it's understandable. It's 67 years old, right? Not everyone's Bill Belichick. Not everyone's, like, even Greg Popovich has struggled, like, the last 8 or 9 years, but not everyone's Bill Belichick. Not everyone's Greg Popovich. Not everyone can keep up with, like, a Kenny Atkinson or a Taylor Jenkins that are finding a way. Like, look at Cleveland with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And, like, last year, that was a lineup that was, like, playable, but they were a mediocre team when those two were on the floor. Now they play the best team in basketball when those two are on the floor. And that is entirely a credit to Kenny Atkinson applying spacing principles and figure out a way to generate spacing out of thin air, even with two, like one non-shooting and one light shooting big. And Tom Thibodeau has been handed a dream offensive roster. And again, like you can roll the ball out. Maybe that's oversimplifying it, but you can win with his style of coaching and his style of offense against 27 teams, but against the best teams that have flexible defenses, that have versatile defenders, zero answers. And that is not magically going to change when he goes from 67 to 68, from year 34 to year 35 coaching the NBA. And unless they come out in the playoffs and look like a different team, or to your point, Mitchell Robinson makes them look like a different team, I don't see how you can bring him back. That being said, I'm kind of with you. I don't have any faith that they'll potentially move on. So you gave some high notes. I gave first they're sour, now they're sweet. First they're sweet. First they're sour, now they're sweet. Now they're sour again. And we can end on that because it was just a very crappy, very dispiriting weekend for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, ending on some Sour Patch Kids. Not quite Mike and Ike's, but I'm sure Josh Hart would approve. He loves junk food.
Yeah,
loves his gummy candies. So maybe if Josh hears this, he can hear. First they're sour, then they're sweet, then they're sour, whatever. Anyway, it's like the new Sour Patch Kids that are sour on the inside too. That would probably slap. I would buy that. Anyway, all right. Well, we're desperate to talk about literally anything else or just end this podcast. So we're just going to do that. So thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you all soon. We'll cover up any games this week, as well as I'm sure have some more existential conversations over the course of this week as we truck towards some more matchups against the best teams in the league. Though thankfully, the Celtics and Cavs are not going to be for, I think, a little while. So get to have a little time off of potentially getting embarrassed again. So let this weekend roll off your back. We'll see what happens. But till next time, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.